Hi, everyone, and welcome to Somerset House and our digital series, Upgrade Yourself Inspiration, bringing industry creatives and insiders to share their career journeys and offer insight and advice. My name is Cherece Lucina, and I am one of the future producers at Somerset House. I am also the founder of Create Conscious Community, which produces and supports events that make spirituality more accessible, relatable, and safe to explore, which makes me really excited about this event today as our guest of honor is super aligned with the work that I do and which this event supports. The Upgrade Yourself program supports emerging new talent, 18 to 25, and we do this with online talks and process-led workshops, skill building, and the London living wage work opportunities and networking events. So to keep up to date with the program, please join our monthly newsletter. You can sign up on the Somerset House website, which the link is at the bottom of each web page. And during this live session, we'd love to hear from you. So please comment on any platforms that you're watching from, and we'll have a chance to read it out. So today we are delighted to be streaming live to New York and introduce the founder of and CEO of Studio Elsewhere, Mirelle Q. Phillips, who are representing this year's New York City Pavilion at the London Design Biennale, presented on-site and online at Somerset House until the 27th of June. So seize the sunshine and get back there as soon as you can. For now, while we're here, please sit back and get comfortable while I introduce Mirelle. Hello.
Good morning or good afternoon over there.
Indeed. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm into this breakfast in New York, lunch in London right now.
I guess we're kind of brunching together.
Yes, we are. We will meet at brunch.
Yes. And where you're, so yeah, you're in New York today.
Yeah, it's beautiful out today. I don't know if you can. You probably can't hear the birds chirping, but we have a beautiful day in the city.
Amazing. We can imagine it for ourselves. We've also finally got some sunshine again. We've had a few rainy days, so we're all doing good all around.
Doing all right.
Indeed. So yeah, I suppose let's get started and see what amusing and beautiful and amazing stuff you've produced. And your journey.
Yeah. Let's see. Can we have the presentation loaded up? Amazing. Thank you, Kyle, wherever you are right now. And thank you all so much for having me today. Cherece, I know we're going to have I'm excited mainly to get to our conversation. So I'm going to talk a bit about the journey that I've been on that is about building a career, but also about the process of being able to work across the idea of noise and stillness in a way of orienting oneself along that journey too. And I find that a lot of things about my journey actually starts with the family that I've come from, who has existed in complete kind of polar opposites from the way that they both come into this world. So I have a photo here up of family that is from one side and the other. My father was born in 1931 in a rural town in Alabama here in the United States, in the Deep South during the Great Depression, from a farming family. And my mother was born in 1949 in Mexico City, just at the height when it was becoming this metropolis, one of the largest ones in the world too. And so growing up, the home that I grew up in was filled with the different languages between Spanish and English, and also what this kind of American South textural voice is as well too. And so I very much grew up in a way of being able to process the different sounds and ideas and concepts that are shared through language, through culture, through completely different ways of being able to view and experience and even describe what the world is. And in my experience of it was always looking for what was shared, what was kind of at the intersection, what were the things that were that sometimes, as you process it, for anyone else who is bicultural, bilingual, you're thinking a lot in terms of what's invisible as well too. I think that there's a space constantly that you're finding at the intersection and what that type of harmony is. My father had a background in computer engineering. He was lifetime Air Force. And so we had this privilege in growing up in the 80s, and my sister and I had computers from a very young age. So we lived between this world of learning how to code on a Commodore 64. So we talk about in my house, there was English, Spanish, and BASIC, this computer programming that was on a Commodore 64. So that gave us these tools through programming, through writing, that our first experience of what the digital world was something that you had to co-create in order to be able to access these kind of brilliant interactive worlds too. And in our household, there was a lot of emphasis on being outside in nature. And I grew up in Clearwater, Florida, which is this type of beach community too. So I found that there was this world before that I didn't find the world of the digital and nature in any type of opposition to each other, but something that could actually be quite balanced. In the computer game worlds that I got to play as a young child, I was always interested in the way that you experience them as these imaginative, interactive journeys. The same way that you can kind of get lost on a hike or being out in the wilderness somewhere, and you're playing with these imagination of basically the trees and the elements of the earth too. So I found myself kind of being able to shuffle between both what were the kind of immersive worlds of the games with also nature, but also in this like wonderful conversation. Let me see if I can move the slide. When I had the opportunity to go to college, I went to a very small college in New Hampshire called Dartmouth College, which is kind of quintessential New England. And it was my first experience of basically having winter coming from Florida and actually accessing mountains for the first time. And there was something that was quite idyllic, and at the same time, a world where you experience kind of that privilege of having 4 years of education that's really surrounded, and which I think those that are listening, that's really about your own growth, your own time and luxury just to be able to learn. And I found that upon graduation, I saw that my peers were either heading straight into a graduate school or going into a corporate job. And the one thing that I felt very drawn to is that whatever the perspective that I had kind of being within, whether you want to call it the ivory towers or whatever that type of collegiate bubble is that I really wanted to push myself to be in another environment that actually just challenged all that perspective and that way of being after 4 years. So I found a fellowship that took me to the Middle East, to Turkey, to Syria, to Lebanon. And without having the language background, with actually not having a lot of the studies for it. So it gave me this experience of being pushed out into the world in a way that had to actually completely just take the architecture of everything I knew and completely rearrange it. Even in the Turkish language, the way that you relate to the world without having certain type of the same pronouns that get changed. So even your spatial orientation and way of being able to see and experience the world profoundly changed. And so it was something that I became very grateful for the opportunity to have these adventures that would push me outside of things that I was comfortable with, familiar with, and had to build a new type of framework to be able to understand. And there's something that was deeply, deeply humbling about what that experience was. That when I eventually came back to America and came back to New York, I knew that there was something at the way of being able to have the intersection of being able to still put myself in a position of experiencing more of the world from these different perspectives and points of view. So I was able to have a connection with a brilliant artist whose name is Sarah Morris, and who's a contemporary artist who works between the mediums of film and paint. And I became her studio manager and film producer, which was an experience that took me all around the world in producing these large scale and immersive art installations, as well as film installations. And working between those two mediums, I found that there was such an economy of speed and time that was different. Working on paintings with the team is something that's very slow, and can take months to keep building up. Whereas a film is so expensive, so you have to make sure that everything happens quite quickly. And we were a team that would have to do 24 shots and setups in one day. So we had the opportunity through different commissions to travel to different places in the world. And I have here a photo of one of our shoots in a favela in Rio. And in my role, I really had to keep being this bridge of being able to set up and produce, working across different industries, different type of gatekeepers to allow us to have access into these very specific places. And at the same time, work in the world of installation, which is something that seems quite beautiful and perhaps a little glamorous once everything's up. But the behind the scenes is constantly this hard work working across the disciplines in order to get something that's actually quite beautiful up in the way that really preserves what is the artwork in it. So I became really interested in how to bridge more of these concepts of what the immersion and the world of art is, was something that I felt connected again to what I grew up with, was still this world of interactive, immersive gaming. And so after that, I ended up spending about 8 years in the video game industry, forming a practice around something called experiential design, which was building these hybrid digital and physical worlds that get at this expression of what it is when we have physical space that's augmented by kind of what is imaginative of the game world space too. And so that was something where I could really start being able to be more in dialogue about these intersections. Gaming is gaming is a medium that's deeply sophisticated between the world of engineering, development, music, storytelling, and it's the work of it is done in an extremely collective way across so many studios. So being exposed to the way that something like that is produced and created and put out in the world was quite influential for me, and a way that I could start forming these concepts around what I was specifically interested in terms of experiential design. Along that way, in my 20s, I actually suffered from a neurotrauma that ended up taking me from my kind of normal, everyday, healthy 20-year-old life into a confined world between hospitals and at-home stay. And the experience of being in hospitals is one for anyone who's familiar of just deep noise and tension and pain, this experience that's so much of the environmental factors that are going on are working in a way that's quite adverse to what you need for resilience, for your own ability to be able to help healing. During that time period when I was in rehab and was in a wheelchair, my family took me to, here in New York, there's the Bronx Botanical Gardens. And it was an experience that I had when I realized that being in a wheelchair was actually one of the best experiences of taking in what this immersive garden was too. And it started transforming some of my ideas I had about the bringing the natural world into these spaces where we could really benefit from them, both in a psychological and physiological way too. And if we compare that with the imagination, the creativity, and the agency of what the game world is too, that there could be something really in what that intersection could be. And so that's what I started playing with and developing, even when I was in video games, of thinking about what are these worlds that we can start building and creating that actually bring this into something that when you move through the environment, you feel in something that's heightening the imagination, connecting you to the natural world and exploring what that wonder is. I realized that that was something that I just needed to pursue in a full practice, which brought me to the world of studio elsewhere. I founded it 2 years ago with a mission to be able to build this practice, which I call Experiential Design, in a collaborative way with neuroscientists, clinicians, patients, family members, and the rest of the healthcare ecosystem of what could healthy environments using immersive technology, biophilic design, physical architecture, basically be able to reimagine a healthier way for what our brains need in an environment as well. So there's been a focus that I've had on being able to develop this, work with researchers to study it, and also think about the applications. So our first application was thinking about stroke patients, the fact that what their environments could be after a stroke that could be an optimal healing environment. So I met with our first patient who was quadriplegic, and I got to know his family members and actually collaborate on what this type of design could be that would take in inspiration of sensory details from some of the places that he felt quite safe and inspired by in his life too. So I'm just going to share a video. We called it La Ermita, which is Spanish for healing, a site of healing that's along these rural places in Spain. All right. So where Laramita was this experience of basically being able to think about the fact that if somebody does not have any movement, if they can't communicate, how can their environment, through other abilities, continue to change, evolve with them as well, particularly if this is just one room that they're going to experience a life in. And also, how can it interact with family members too, and be a space that is actually really conducive to a quality of life, that can be still beautiful, creative, engaging as well for everyone involved. Going to moving during that time. So we're now in late 2019 and early 2020, where we're continuing to build at Studio Elsewhere what this practice was and its applications, for the assessment, the diagnostics, and the rehabilitation for patients with depression, with neurotraumas, with anxiety. And we had also come up with this idea of what a recharge room is, with one of our just brilliant collaborators, Dr. David Petrino, who's the head of rehabilitation innovation at Mount Sinai Health System here in New York City. And it was this concept for healthcare workers, particularly in ER and ICUs, who can come into an enriched environment and through choice choose what type of experience they could be in that is a nature-based experience to help them with cognitive, emotional, and physiological restoration, especially given that they have to work at these high performance levels as well. As we were building that, we were also working with professional athletes in a way of thinking through how it could be a shared experience to help them with bonding. And then, as we all know, in March 2020, the all healthcare workers became ER and ICU workers overnight due to the pandemic, and New York City became the global epicenter for it. So the second week of shutdown, my team and I went into the Mount Sinai Hospital and just immediately started becoming a design and technology crisis studio that we could actually take what these rooms were and start deploying them for healthcare workers. So we deployed our first recharge room on March 23rd of 2020, and immediately saw that it had a restorative and impactful effect on healthcare workers. It was something that they could come in during surge and have a safe space where they had agency, where they could actually choose as a unit what their experience would be and then debrief afterwards as well. It became a place of being able to release complex emotions and be able to process them as well too. So we set up these environments and then have since then been able to scale 20 of them in the city and more through more health systems and states here in the United States too. And we, from sitting in on kind of thousands of these sessions, it became really apparent of just what it means to have a physical space to go into where teams could have that moment of stillness, of quiet, where that meets them in this compassionate moment of just where they're at. That's not asking them to be anything else or to do anything else, of just being able to check in with themselves and where they're at, and offer this design around being able to compassionately interact with other colleagues who are probably going through very similar things and have those moments of connection. So right now that it's we're in June, I'm finding ourselves being able to work along deploying more of the recharge rooms for healthcare workers, and then launching some of our patient experiences across a few different sites as well. And so we are in that intersection that I think that I've talked about, being on a journey of listening to where there is harmony, where from these disparate elements, there's something that can be brought together. And how in space that we can think about things that they may seem invisible, especially coming into sites that like hospitals, where you could come into a room and you just can't imagine how could this become something that's beautiful and multidimensional. But I am forever inspired by the way that that's actually just who we all are ultimately, just completely technicolor, multidimensional. And so to have our environments be able to echo back what that type of fullness is too, is something that I hope that in our work we can continue to be able to have, even in these quiet moments, a type of affirmational impact of you're seen, you're heard, you're embraced, and hopefully leave with a bit of inspiration. All right.
That was fantastic. I really love the sentiment that you mentioned at the end, that we're all technicolor and unique and diverse. And yeah, if more of our environments could reflect that, that would be really beautiful. Yeah. So thank you for that presentation and sharing your journey as well, and all of the intimate parts as well. That's really, really beautiful and very authentic of you. I hope people were inspired watching it and listening to it and seeing that, yeah, inspiration really comes from all different walks of life and different places, especially the whole putting yourself in uncomfortable or taking yourself out of your comfort zone to sort of be inspired and add little dynamic energy to your thought processes, I suppose, which is really cool. So we're going to open it up and allow people to send in any questions that they have for Mirelle about this journey or about the projects. But also I have some questions.
Yes.
And so I was really interested to know, because I know you're saying your work is very influenced by sort of science and data. So what was the most exciting piece of like science or data that influenced your work?
I think that's actually just in the a lot of the lived experience as well too. So we collaborate with different types of neurologists, neuroscientists, neurosurgeons in our work, and there's this kind of, I call it like a jazz concert, because you're playing these different instruments, but you're also like riffing off each other. So science is something that like there's all of these constraints, and it's highly rigorous. But it also is just this, like, the other side of this coin of creativity. It's just rigorous exploration that probably starts with something that has to do with skepticism of basically being able to say, all right, we have to be able to have the system that is going to prove this, and that is able to be reproduced as well too. But along that journey, in the same way of creativity, it's just a lot of deep wonder and in this exploration of just what's unknown. And so our work with scientists is being in that kind of conversation where I feel like it's an education for me every day in doing something which is actually withholding judgment, kind of withholding the idea that you actually understand fully what something is, because the reality of our natural world, and I mean that in terms of like science and physics and our brain, is just absolutely wild. And it is this world where it is inspiring in the fact of how much we just don't know, and you have to be a deep listener, and or and or just be able to, in looking at data, it's also just being able to listen closely to it, to see the patterns of it too. And so the surprising part for me in every day is being able to keep hearing the resonance between our languages of
Mhm.
creativity, design, and engineering and science. Um, in another way of saying that is, I spend a lot of time looking, like reading journals and um, kind of being able to read studies. We help build new experimental studies as well too, and it's very funny to see language that is something that I probably am trying to express through environmental design, when it's kind of reduced to something that's actually just in a paper, but it has none of the, what I call the technicolor of what the thing is that you're trying to build too. So working within that, if you want to call it tension, but I find that that tension also allows for just deep partnership as well too.
Interesting. So it's using create curiosity,
Mm.
sort of find those trends, and then
Hmm.
translating those trends into an experience, which is really cool. I really like that sort of relationship that you've
Hmm.
identified, and yeah, that you used to sort of be inspired. And it's cool that they people don't necessarily assume that they align, but they really do. Um,
I think so. What do you think? I mean, is it? Um, I think it's this theme of the things that we think are dissonant. Are they really, or is it just different parts of the kaleidoscope? You
mhm.
know.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot recently, actually,
Mm.
and realize it's important for us to remember our sacredness, I think, because
Mm.
actually this experience is so unique. And to see work that aligns that awareness of just how sacred, unique, and different our experiences, and then making spaces that really support and champion and remind you of that. Uh,
Mm.
it's really beautiful and really important. So
Hmm.
yeah, really happy that that's where the world is. You know, we've got people doing this kind of work now, and that's really really beautiful. I also noticed you. So in your story, you went from helping an artist and producing, doing that sort of work, to almost becoming an artist as well, uh,
Mm.
in the rooms. So, like, I'd love to know a bit more about that transition. If there was like a particular transition where you realize like now it's time for me to curate the space, or was it are you more behind the scenes and you let other people sort of guide the aesthetics of things?
Um, I I actually love embracing the term designer as opposed to artist. The designer is, I've come to learn, like we're very practical. We're very much about like how is thinking about the the user in a way, and in my world, kind of collaborating with that user too.
Mhm.
And the what also I just think fits who I am, and is one of the reasons that I uh, really look forward to this work every day, is because it's collaborative. It's a team. The team at Studio Elsewhere that I work with every day, uh, where it's a crew of just phenomenal designers, technologists, engineers who I see um, are all just deeply creative, and we're working together to create what this is. So I think that there's the, you know, in my role sometimes it's just kind of figuring out how to be a good orchestrator.
Mhm.
um, there's absolutely what a vision is and where I can be as a guide, but in other ways my role is how to create a kind of safe, sustainable way of being able to give this work to the shared group, for all of us to kind of be in conversation with our different skills and abilities to be able to contribute and have impact too.
Mhm.
So I think for me, it's less of, kind of becoming an artist as being able to grow into a role where you are out there in the world. And in that process, it does get very noisy. I don't know if you experience this too, is once you're out, then you go from kind of somewhat of the quietness of the behind the scenes work, where it's just like you're kind of contributing in one way, to what it is when it gets a lot louder when you're driving work and you're having to work at a new pace as well too. And so I think that my journey has been one of how to work between kind of deep time and quietness and your own self doing something, to being very, very collaborative and working with a lot of people to get something out there in the world too.
That's lovely. And I guess like seeing how different professions are actually really creative. Like I think people tend to separate, like once you start thinking about science, it's like, no, it's very
Mm.
by the book, straightforward. There's no imagination. It's just actually being able to see that a lot of science informs a lot of imagination, or at least helps build it. So I guess for any viewers out there who are coming from a certain profession or have typically gone down a route that's maybe a little bit more perceived to be within a box, that actually you can really take it out of the box and work with people, collaborate with people in different ways to create
Yeah.
something new and magical, which is lovely.
Yeah.
So yeah, a beautiful orchestrator kind of position,
Yeah.
kind of tie people together and connect them.
Yeah, I think it's all like it's these all these similar themes where if you are if you're like I just kind of gravitates towards things, you're hearing dissonance, but you can kind of start see what is shared,
Mhm.
and you want to kind of deepen what those connections are too. And I love what you were saying about, and I hope that that's the way that we're all shifting, given this past year too, where my hope is that we've reckoned with our siloedness
Mhm.
and see the need and the importance of interconnectivity,
Mhm.
of understanding interdependency, whether we're talking about communities or we're also just talking about disciplines. The way that this pandemic has also shaped the healthcare work is that everyone has had to really work together and put competition, whatever that is aside, for what we have to do to truly be able to take care of each other too. So I really hope to see more of that in many different ways, what cross pollination can continue to look like, and new forms, new genres,
Mhm.
new things coming out of that.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like, I guess we're kind of starting to see technology and the natural, or a need for technology in the natural world and our nature in general to start mixing so that we can be a bit more aligned with where we're going and where we've been. Uh,
Mm,
so that's really beautiful.
mm. That's beautiful what you just said.
Thank you.
That idea of um, under because technology often can feel so like there's an amnesia to it, like it's losing our sense of a time before it. But technology has always been around. It's like as humans have been around too. And I always think that it's kind of comforting to think of like deep time in nature, mountain range, things that have like existed for on such a large scale,
Mhm.
that we have available to us to actually be able to like to learn from too.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I hope that that energy or that sort of idea and concepts is more and more embraced. I think it will kind of naturally have to happen.
Yeah, I think it has to.
Survive with just completely distancing from it anyway. So yeah, that's really nice. And I guess that sort of it kind of um, makes me wonder in terms of what part of your work do you prefer? Or do you really like to see the most? Is it the development and the research stages, or is it once it's there and it's out there and it's being used by the intended users?
Oh, I mean, I would say that I'm into a lot of the continuum because it's just each one is different and unique in its own ways. Right now, what we just went through is we went through a year of stretching ourselves, and I can say for myself in just ways that I have never, it's that's the moment that was like the occasion to rise to is
Mhm.
what this crisis has been. And we weren't planning on all of a sudden creating like dozens of these environments and figuring out how to put them out in the world and just like everything that comes with that, and kind of growing a team and doing things that were quite impossible every day and trying to keep our sanity. And I know we this is about talked about this idea of creative well-being and resilience, and something to that point is how to be able to work with expansion, but also contraction in the way of when do you need to come back to a quietness, a stillness, and to integrate. If you've had a time period that has pushed you and you've been able to create so much, there's something about like momentum and speeding. And I can imagine people, especially when they're in their early 20s, getting out there, going out in the world and like just doing a million things and feeling that like kind of rush of momentum. But how to carve out in a really strategic way quietness, stillness, reflection, to be able to integrate what you've just experienced into how you want to keep moving forward. And that's the time period that myself and the studio are right now.
Mhm.
Is we've done so much, and we've just intentionally taken out these months to like go from a 12 to I would say a 7, and be able to just have these discussions and talks, and even with our collaborators, of what we've learned and what our kind of next phases are. Um, so I kind of the part that is the hardest for me is when you're just in a day where it's it's full logistics, it's full like execution and operations,
Mhm.
and you kind of need those moments where you can just be present in any type of way, taking out time for like meaningful connection, having being able just to witness somebody else. And in my case, I find in my own growth how to switch in a way where I can go from someone who's overseeing and having to be that conductor,
Mhm.
uh, to actually being soft, to be present, to be warm, to be nourishing to others who are looking to me for that as well too. So I think that's all kind of part of what that growth in that journey looks like.
Mhm. That's really lovely. Yeah, I guess that attitude as a CEO or yeah, a business owner at the top especially isn't something I think you typically think of. I think people kind of
Mm.
it's a very cold role. But to see that actually you don't have to lose your humanity in business to be successful or to encourage and to have a solid team that are dedicated and committed because you help them feel seen um, in your work and then encourage them, but also can manage and keep you level-headed in any kind of stressful situation. So
And it
yeah,
takes work, don't you think? Like it's not,
Mhm.
I even wrestle with the term CEO because of all of this like baggage that we have with it too, and what we think about it. And it's something that I've had to. I'm very much still in that process of trying to build and create what my own leadership style is, of one that I actually feel like is reflective of my humanity, as you said, and others. That it doesn't need to look like something else, because I don't think those things are necessarily working for all of us.
Yeah,
And
exactly. You know,
like I don't think that like what we uh, are looking for in society right now is more of what
just
we've already
old. Yeah,
what
probably
we
not.
have.
I think,
And
yeah,
at the
innovation.
same, yeah. And it's also hard. It's also hard to unlearn if you've been out in the world and uh, you in any capitalistic society that, like, it's basically about progress and productivity, and you're rewarded for every single thing except for rest.
Yeah.
And and so what it is as a like as being a leader and being able to keep, you know like a vision of what it means to actually think about that too.
hmm Yeah, definitely. And I guess I'd be interested to know when you first sort of started, especially when it came to really founding and beginning.
Mm.
Did you feel like you had any sort of like imposter syndrome, or was there any kind of self-doubt that you had to overcome? Or was it sort of just like, I have a vision, I'm rolling with it, it's going this way, and suddenly it's sort of built into something, and now you're there, and there was no imposter syndrome because you just followed your heart, really?
I love for you to imagine the answer to that too. I think you would probably know what it is, and it's so terrifying because it's
Mhm,
so vulnerable. It's whenever you have something that probably is worthwhile in some type of way,
mhm,
and it doesn't maybe look or fit into a good box. And what I've been trying to do is something that's in one of the most conservative, risk averse industries, and still keep an integrity of what
mhm,
it is that it's trying to do. And so it was uh, it felt like jumping out of a helicopter with no parachute and just being like, somewhere I'm just gonna trust that, like, I think I know what this is, and I think if
mhm,
I like surround myself with certain people,
mhm,
um, but I think I've been reflecting on this about the imposter syndrome and wondering if there's like some other nuance to what that is as well. And
mhm,
I think what can go alongside of it is just what it means to have to be just deeply disoriented. How to feel when you're starting anything that's new, and you're literally in a new, almost like in a psychological way, a geographical region. And it's kind of when I moved to the Middle East. I
mhm,
don't know what the language is. I don't know what the culture is. I don't know how to get around here. I know nothing about where I am right now. And that was the process of kind of starting the studio, which is
mhm.
there is no tour guide. Like there's no like bus stop that you're like, the directions are where.
Yeah, or book.
Yeah, you are the like journey of when you're creating and when you're innovating and starting something in an entrepreneurial way, is that it just kind of takes the ability to sit with the discomfort every single day, that you're out on a limb, you are exposed,
Mhm,
um, you will fail at some point or at many points,
mhm,
and you may not be equipped for all of that either. um, and when the pandemic happened, I didn't have the opportunity to actually process the imposter part because I was just so busy in going and just being like, we have to get things out. We need to be doing it. So it wasn't until after Surge that things started catching up to me.
mhm,
And I found this massive disconnect between, I kind of blinked and then people knew about the work. Um, and I wasn't I was still in my mode of like, but we haven't really actually shared what we're doing yet, and a lot of that work is kind of behind the scenes, but
mhm,
now I'm actually talking about it more. And then that's when I started feeling, I don't know, like if it's necessarily this imposter, but just this, how do I genuinely relate, the truthfulness of what this work is, to an outside world who is kind of sometimes more interested in like these nicely packaged
Mm-hmm.
ways of thinking and a certain type of framework. And I'm just out here really trying my best every day to keep creating and to just, and I don't have all the answers either on it too. So I think the like kind of settling in with like the imposterness is just like setting a more like realistic standard for yourself, which is that you're not, we're all trying to figure out
Yeah.
the answers, and sometimes it's not even about that. It's just about asking more questions and
Yeah.
knowing which ones are more compelling.
That's really humbling.
Mm.
And a grounding perspective as well. I'm sure a lot of people will hopefully take some. I mean, I definitely will as well. Sort of just trusting your heart and free falling, but trusting in that divine timing, I suppose.
Mm.
Should all hopefully come together at some point somehow. Not sure how, but you're going with it. I
Yeah.
like doing things as well, and it's got me places. So yeah.
Yeah. I think also having that when things kind of fall apart sometimes, I think sitting with the fact that like to do that, what you just talked about is to also be aware that there's going to be pain, there's going to be failure, there you are going to crash land at certain points, but the creative resilience part is, are you able to kind of just say, all right, that's the arena that we're in, so we're just going to try to keep going back out there, learn, integrate, like figure out what kind of caused that, but to have the grace to just keep trying.
And would you say that's this kind of notion is how your practice is sort of evolving in the
Absolutely.
future?
Yeah.
Lovely.
It's evolving myself too, I think, as when you're kind of creating something, and it's very much every day is just like one reckoning, humbling process. I think every day is just a day where you very much understand that you are just one person, and you have this like finite energy and ability. And I've become really more comfortable about the fact that like, I don't know about you, but I've hated disappointing people. That's probably one of the things that, in kind of doing your work, you just like, you want to be able to do work and be able to show up in the world that, you're pleasing others, you're everyone's kind of proud of something, but also just reckoning with the fact that like part of being, a just human being is that disappointment is going to come up, and how to actually be resilient towards what that is too, to not let that crush you and the work and the times that it fails, but to just like kind of sit alongside of that as a companion, be like, all right, it's like, I'm going to embrace you, and we're just going to continue to go on this journey together.
Yeah, these are really, really good mindful tips, I think, in just not necessarily rejecting a negative experience, but settling with it, grounding with it, not necessarily letting it define you, but just acknowledging how it's made you feel and how it's moved within you. So that's really, really beautiful advice. It really, really aligns with a lot of the work that I do as well. So
I'm so excited about your work. I want you to give this talk.
I'm
just want to hear
10 years from now, who knows, maybe 5.
No, maybe tomorrow.
Maybe tomorrow. But until then, I'm definitely going to take a lot of what you've shared and suggested, and a lot of that, internalize it moving forward. And I really hope to see some more reflections in the future of this work and this energy and this sort of ethos and principles. Even in management style, I feel like that's really important to sort of have this collaborative and affirming stance with your co-workers as well. So that's really, really beautiful. I want to give you a chance to say one last thing to the audience, to anyone, any little, I mean, you've shared so many nuggets of wisdom anyway, so it feels a bit unfair maybe to ask for another one, but if you do have any last words for everybody, I'd love to hear it.
What I would say, especially, if you're at any type of crossroads of your journey in a career professional way, is to take time to be quiet and to really listen to what's the loudest voice that's coming up. What's that voice that is grounding you in what is the life that you're trying to create for yourself? Success looks so different from every type of person. And so, what does a good life look and feel like? What is your North Star? How can you keep putting one foot in front of the other in that direction? There's always going to be noise from the rest of society about what all of these, what success can be, of what this kind of aspirational world of things from getting money to press to all of these things, that at the end of the day, what resonates most with you, with the kind of like when you go to bed at night, like that was a great day, and I feel very fortunate for the people that I got to be around and work with. So that's what I would be my kind of final advice and words.
Beautiful. I feel like that's a very, very good note to take.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe something you can even write on your mirror and wake up to every day, live fulfillingly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us in the morning for you and in lunchtime for me. So
Yes,
for
our
us,
brunch time.
indeed. And yeah, I really look forward to connecting again in the future and following your work. Likewise, for everybody in the audience, please stay in touch and join our monthly newsletter. You can sign up on the main Somerset House website. And yeah, check out the website to find out about all the other exciting upcoming events that we have, even especially on the Upgrade Yourself program. And yeah, I guess we will catch you guys again next time. Thank you so much, Mirelle. Have a
Thank
beautiful
you.
day.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.